This is a fictional investigative narrative created purely for entertainment. She accepted a ride from someone she thought she knew. 3 days later, she was dead, hidden in a basement. For 45 years, the man responsible continued fixing cars in the same town where her mother still shopped for groceries. If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing and tell us where you're watching from. October in Bancroft, Ontario had arrived cold and unforgiving. By the second week of the month, the maples along Main Street had already surrendered their leaves, and morning fog off the York River clung to the valley like something alive. That it was 1974. The Vietnam War was winding down, Nixon had just resigned, and in small towns like Bancroft, life moved at the pace of harvest seasons and church socials. Linda Margaret Sullivan was 19, a nursing student with long brown hair she tied back with a simple elastic band, and blue eyes that people said looked kind, even when she was tired. She worked the afternoon shift at Dawson's Pharmacy on Main Street 3 days a week, filling prescriptions under the watchful eye of Mr. Harold Dawson, a man who always smelled of mentholated ointment and pipe tobacco. Linda lived with her parents, 8 kilometers north of town, in a small wooden house with a sagging porch and a vegetable garden. Her mother, Evelyn, tended it obsessively, humming hymns while sewing dresses for the women in town. Her father, Thomas, farmed tobacco on 30 acres of stubborn clay soil. Linda was their only child, born late in their marriage, and they loved her with the quiet intensity of people who knew how fragile good things could be. Friday, October 11th, was supposed to be just another day. Linda had morning classes at the community college annex in Maddock, followed by her pharmacy shift from 1 to 5 p.m. She wore a navy blue coat her mother had made, carried her beige canvas bag stuffed with nursing textbooks, and walked with the slightly pigeon-toed gait she had since childhood. Normally, her neighbor, Mrs. Ida Thompson, who worked at the post office, would pick her up at 5:15 p.m. But that day, Ida had left town unexpectedly. Her sister in Peterborough had gone into labor. She didn't think to tell Linda so when Linda stepped out of Dawson's Pharmacy at 5:22. The sun already sinking behind the pines, she walked to the corner of Main Street and Highway 62, stuck out her thumb and waited. Hitchhiking wasn't unusual then, especially in rural Ontario, and especially among familiar faces. Arthur Lemoyne, who ran the Esso station on the corner, saw her standing there. A blue Ford pickup pulled over. Linda climbed in without hesitation. Arthur didn't think much of it. In those days, everyone trusted everyone. The last person to see Linda alive was 61-year-old Arthur, a man who sold gasoline and counted the days until retirement. He had run the Esso station at Main and Highway 62 since 1953, back when Bancroft was still a mining town with gravel roads. By 1974, he had filled thousands of tanks and seen countless faces, but he remembered Linda. She always waved at him. That Friday evening, just after 5:30, he watched as she got into the truck. A light blue Ford F-100, maybe a 1971 or 72 model, with a dent in the passenger door. The driver leaned over, spoke something to her through the window. She smiled, nodded, and climbed in. Arthur only caught a fleeting glimpse. The man wore a dark cap and jacket, nothing distinctive. The truck drove away north on Highway 62, tail lights disappearing into the dusk. Arthur didn't mention it for 3 days. Then Evelyn Sullivan came to the station, pale and shaking, asking if anyone had seen her daughter. By then, Linda had been missing for 72 hours. Arthur told police everything he remembered, but memory is slippery. The driver's details blurred, black or brown cap, young or middle-aged, he couldn't be sure. Police canvassed the area, 30 kilometers if they had seen anything. Nothing. The last confirmed sighting of Linda Margaret Sullivan was 5:32 p.m. on October 11th, climbing into a truck that shouldn't have stopped. Her mother called authorities at 8:30 p.m. By then, fog had rolled in thick, and searchlights couldn't penetrate more than 20 feet into the trees. Sheriff Gerald Patrick O'Brien, 52, a Korean War veteran with a limp from shrapnel, was known for being thorough if not imaginative. He had been Hastings County Sheriff since 1968 and had seen bar fights, drunk drivers, domestic disputes, and even a hunting accident that still haunted him. Missing persons cases were rare. Missing young women were even rarer. When Evelyn Sullivan's panicked voice reached him that Friday night, Jerry mobilized everything he had. 4 deputies, 2 tracking dogs borrowed from the Ministry of Natural Resources, and by dawn Saturday, over 60 volunteers from Bancroft and surrounding townships. They started at the pharmacy, working outward in concentric circles, walking the shoulders of Highway 62 for 12 kilometers in both directions, searching campgrounds along the York River, combing trails into Faraday Township. The dogs picked up Linda's scent near the Esso station, lost it at the roadside, found it again briefly near an old logging road 3 kilometers north, and then it vanished for good. The temperature had dropped to just 2 degrees Celsius, and a cold, relentless rain began to fall, a storm that wouldn't let up for 3 days. Volunteers trudged through mud, flashlights casting weak, yellow beams through the dripping pines, but they found nothing on October 16th, 5 days after Linda disappeared. A hunter named Marcus Dubois was checking his trap lines near an abandoned hunting camp in Faraday when he spotted something half-buried under wet leaves. It was Linda's canvas bag. Inside were her nursing textbooks, a blue ballpoint pen, a grocery receipt from the IGA dated October 10th, and a water-damaged notebook filled with her handwriting, lecture notes, diagrams of the circulatory system, a grocery list on the last page. But there was no wallet, no identification. The bag had been soaked by rain, but not long enough for the fabric to rot. Sheriff Jerry O'Brien sent it to the Ontario Provincial Police Forensic Lab in Toronto. The results came back with no usable fingerprints, no blood, no hair fibers that didn't belong to Linda. The camp had been abandoned since the early 1960s, the roof half collapsed, windows long gone. Tire tracks nearby had been washed away, leaving nothing but shapeless ruts. Searchers expanded their radius, even bringing in a helicopter that circled the area for 2 days, its rotors cutting the cold, wet air with a dull roar that echoed off the hills. Evelyn and Thomas Sullivan stood at the edge of the search zone, watching the helicopter appear and disappear in the fog. Evelyn's face was blank. Thomas's hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles went white. By the end of October, the first snow had fallen, and the search was suspended until spring. Sheriff O'Brien was not a man to give up easily. But he understood the limits of a small-town police force in 1974. He had no crime lab, no computer database, no forensic team beyond what the OPP could spare. With no body, no witnesses, and no clear evidence of foul play, he relied on a painstaking process of elimination. He started with a list of 14 men in Hastings County who owned light blue Ford F-100 trucks manufactured between 1970 and 1973. He interviewed each one. Most were farmers, 2 were contractors, 1 a traveling salesman who was in Sudbury the day Linda disappeared, receipts to prove it. The 9th name on the list was Raymond Charles Hoffman, 34, a mechanic running a small garage out of a barn 6 kilometers west of Bancroft. Married to Patricia and Gordon, a 4th grade teacher at Bancroft Elementary, they had 2 sons, Kyle and Jeremy, aged 9 and 6. Raymond had lived in the area his whole life, was active in St. John's Lutheran Church, coached Little League baseball, and had no criminal record beyond a speeding ticket. On November 2, 1969, in 1974, Sheriff O'Brien arrived at the Hoffman property. Raymond was under the hood of a John Deere tractor, hands black with grease, blonde hair falling into his eyes. He looked up, smiled, wiped his hands on a rag, and invited the sheriff inside. Patricia made coffee, and the 3 sat at the kitchen table. O'Brien asked if Raymond knew Linda Sullivan. He had seen her around town, maybe once or twice at the pharmacy, but not personally. Then the sheriff asked about the afternoon of October 11th. Raymond said he was home, working in the garage, fixing a carburetor for a customer. Patricia confirmed it. She came home from school around 4 p.m. They had dinner together, watched television, and went to bed. O'Brien asked to see the truck. Raymond led him to the barn. The Ford was clean, the interior vacuumed, the bed empty except for a toolbox and a coil of rope he used for towing. O'Brien checked the glove compartment under the seats, ran his hand along the dashboard. Nothing. He thanked Raymond, got back in his cruiser, and drove away, noting in his file, R. Hoffman Cooperative, alibi confirmed, truck clean, no signs. By December, the investigation had shifted to Kenneth Almeida, a 43-year-old itinerant laborer with a history of violence. He had been working construction in the area that October and was seen drinking at the Belmont Hotel the night Linda disappeared. Almeida also had a restraining order from a former girlfriend in Toronto. O'Brien questioned him 5 times between December and February. Without evidence, Almeida was released. As the months dragged on, leads dried up. By spring 1975, the investigation had stalled. In small towns, time doesn't move forward, it just piles up like snow in a ditch. Linda Sullivan became a name people barely mentioned. By 1980,